Welcome back. You're still watching Citizen Extra, the Friday edition with me, Fred Indimuli. Very interesting discussions. 10 days to the elections. What exactly should we be doing here? Our politicians and candidates are busy traversing the country, making sure they make as many stops as possible. But should that be the way to go? 10 days to the elections. Are the voters aware of their duty and what exactly is expected of them come election day? Do they know probably, for example, how to mark a ballot paper? Do they know what to do in case you're looking for your candidate's symbol and you cannot find it? Do they know how to ask for assistance once in a polling station? These are some of the questions that we are asking. I'm still here with my panelists, Mark Bichachi, Mary Kamau, and we're also joined now by Nakia J. White and Onchari Oyeyo. Good morning, na karibuni sana.
Asante.
Now, issues of concern, voter awareness vis-a-vis public rallies that we are seeing, and we're going to see more this weekend. Today, President Uhuru Kenyatta is in Nandi to try and contain some of the damage that may have been affected there by the NASA Brigade once they were there a day ago. NASA, on the other hand, going to Kajiado, will be traversing that whole route between Kitengela all the way to Namanga. But should this actually be the way to go 10 days to the election, Nakia? Don't you think that probably Kenyans have a different need, and that is preparation on the actual polling, which would actually assist even these candidates to solidify their numbers?
So I think two things. One, Kenyans do need to hear from the candidates. I think it's very important that candidates go out and talk to the voters and ask for the votes. In terms of polling, that's something incredibly different, and how the polls are ran and what happens on election day. Those are two separate issues. The IEBC is in control of what happens on election day, while candidates are responsible for asking each and every citizen for their vote. So for me, there are two separate issues.
But don't you think that 10 days to the elections, these candidates, we've already had everything that they have to say. We've examined their manifestos. Some of these rallies that they're carrying out, they're just repeat rallies. Yesterday, the president was in Busia. He's been there before. Same issues he discussed last time he was there. He went to Laikipia, same issues. NASA has previously been in Kajiado. They're just repeat rallies. Nothing new to be had. Don't you think that probably voter education should come in now?
I think, again, voter education is important, but that is the job of the IEBC, to make sure that voters are educated about how to vote, what the results of the votes will be, what to expect at the polling stations. That's one issue. In terms of candidates, the president, Raila, and so many other candidates or aspirants looking for seats, they have to ask the citizens for votes. And sometimes you have to go to the same type of place the same time, like Busia or Nandi, or you have to visit them as many times as you can, because you can't take any vote for granted. No vote should be taken for granted. You have to, as a candidate, it is the candidate's job to ask each and every single person for their vote, and sometimes you have to go back and remind them, especially as you get closer to the election. Are
you saying it's not their responsibility to try and ensure that voters are prepared for the actual voting process?
I think in some ways they can talk about, hey, you need to be very careful when you go and vote, you go home. I think that they can probably reiterate what the IEBC is already saying. But again, in terms of how the election is run, that, in my opinion, is the job of the IEBC. Certainly it is up to the candidates to reinforce what the IEBC is saying, but it is not their job.
Before Mark, you come in, let me ask Onchari Oyeyo, do you agree with Nakia that it's none of the politicians' business to worry about how the voters will carry themselves on election day?
Thank you so much, Fred. I think that is a shared responsibility between the IEBC and the candidates, because if you go to then campaign so vigorously and you don't get to remember that you need to educate your voters, you can as well lose votes. So the candidates can come in at some point and tell the voters, hey, when you go to vote, do X, Y, Z. But primarily, I think it's the IEBC which needs to educate voters. And for the continued and repetitious kind of campaigning by the candidates, I think it points to the closeness of the race. Raila has to go back to places he's been before to make sure he makes final touches. Especially if the president goes to a place where Raila has been, Raila feels compelled to go back and, and do the damage. So it points to the closeness of the contest itself. But the IBC has to take responsibility. Last time we were here and we discussed the problems IBC has had in terms of reaching out to voters. There is a very big problem. They've not done the kind of education we'd expect. So the IBC takes responsibility for voter education. That is not the job of the candidates. If they do anything in that direction, I think it's charity.
Okay. Well, the IEBC will be speaking within this hour. A chairperson, Wafula Chebukati, will be addressing the nation from the Bomas of Kenya, which is the National Tallying Center, on the status of IEBC's preparedness for the elections. But Mark, you wanted to say something about that?
You know, I hate to do this, but I think the two panelists have literally just landed into Kenya. So let me school them a little bit. There's no one in this nation who's got a bigger voice than a politician. If the politician wants to educate the Kenyan on any particular matter, they have bigger voice, bigger airtime on any station, any form of media than any other person. That's the reality. So when you understand that about the Kenyan population, you understand that I had a conversation with my house help today, and I had to inform her that she cannot vote from anywhere. She has to vote from where she registered. So what does that tell you? That the IEBC can speak as much as it wants, but the political class, if they want to win, need to educate their voters about how to vote, where to vote, and when to vote. And in this particular election, thanks to a brigade called NASA, they have asked for people to volunteer to protect their vote, which is fine, but the question is, how? These guys have not been told how to do it. They don't know what to expect. They don't know how to report. They don't know what to do. So what we are looking at in this particular election cycle is we're looking at a situation we'll have a lot of confusion if the political class does not sit down and decide to say, this is how you vote. That is very important. Secondly, consolidating your vote and making sure your voters are going to vote for you at this point in the campaign. What you need to be pushing is what we call an emotional push. That tie-in where I have to do this. It's do or die for me. Now, in 2013, that was natural. There was the ICC question. Now, in 2017, that question is not there. There's a lot of voter apathy. So what do you need? You need to have a campaign that will get out the vote, that will compel people to come out and vote. And if you look internationally, at this point in the campaign, even in the last election, the Trump election, and the election which the Prime Minister Theresa May lost in the UK, it was about getting out people to vote, because there are lots of people who are voting for the first time. They're below 25, they're millennials, and you know them. Let's just be honest, they're not quite driven to do stuff. So you need to inspire them to come out. Let's not pretend that we live in a utopian society.
And only politicians can do this, Mark?
The reality of the matter is this, Fred. Between your Twitter followers and that of any presidential candidate of note, I'm sure they will rank you 5 to 10 times. Just on their social media platforms alone, they're able to reach more people. Secondly, if you were to look at the debates going on in this nation, across the nation, 80% to 70% of them are about these politicians. They have a bigger voice. I'm not saying that the media can't do anything. I'm not saying the IBC can't do anything. I'm just saying that the political class in this particular country has a bigger voice.
And yet they stand to gain the most.
Yes.
Mary, it's about tying the loose ends. Yes, 10 days to the elections. What should the politicians be concentrating on right now, instead of drumming the same message that they've been pushing all through in their rallies? What do you think they should be focusing on in as far as tying the loose ends now?
Sadly, as Mark pointed out, they are our celebrities, and these celebrities have such a powerful voice. And what I'm very uncomfortable with is the message of them versus us, that because of them we have the problems we have today. That is not entirely true. And so this division of people between them and us needs to be cut and nipped in the bud. We need to ensure that we send a message of peace. We need to ensure that these politicians will make a stand for our nation, because whoever comes into power is a Kenyan at the end of the day. And we need to ensure that in 2022 we have more people voting. Disenfranchisement is a major issue today. A lot of Kenyans who are registered in urban centers are very fortunate to be registered there. There was a case a couple of, I think, months ago where a young lady who was from Western Kenya was not allowed to get an ID because she was in a different location of this country. Now that happens a lot. So you end up with individuals in Kenya today who have no birth certificates, no IDs, and they're in their 30s and 40s. How are we going to ensure that their needs and their the fact that they can't vote alone is a major, major issue, and I want politicians to address that issue. It's too late right now. We have a couple of days left before we go to the polls, but I want them to be able to honestly tell us that there will be changes in the next 5 years, that we will not have grand corruption, that we will not have striking teachers and nurses and doctors. This has to stop.
Nakia, is it still time to talk about those issues of who's going to do what once elected? It's 10 days to the elections. Isn't it about getting the vote out, as Mark says, and probably because we've had even issues, cases where, and this is just allegations yet to be corroborated, that there could be some people who are traveling up country, yet they are registered to vote in urban centers, but they're traveling up country because schools are closing. They're taking the children to go see Shosho and Kuka instead of staying in town and waiting for the 8th of August to vote. Now, this is some of the communication. Don't you think that politicians should be focusing on such and not just on, yes, I'll bring sugar and I'll bring unga on the table right now?
I think to my fellow panelist's point, he did make a really good point. Where it is a shared responsibility, as did you, that there is a shared responsibility between the politicians or the candidates and the IEBC to ensure that citizens understand how to vote. Although, as IEBC, as an independent body, it is their responsibility to ensure that people understand how to vote and what to expect, and if they're not registered, if they don't have their birth certificate, where they need to vote. And I think that again should be backed up by, or kind of reiterated by, candidates that do have a big voice and do have a big political and social media following. So in terms of what the responsibility of a candidate is, I think that they do have a shared responsibility in that, but certainly not more than the Independent Electoral Boundaries Commission.
Yes, so if the IEBC, I'm sure it has done its bit, and if you go to the IEBC's website, you'll see quite a number of infographics in as far as that is concerned, on how to vote, where to vote, what you need to come with. But I've also seen one candidate in today's Daily who has printed out a booklet, and this is one of the top two presidential candidates, on exactly how his name will appear, his running mate's name will appear, and where you place the tick. Ontario, don't you think that is what we should be seeing more of, especially now in the rundown?
In terms of, you're talking about politicians educating voters?
Yes.
Well, once again, I want to take you back to a statement which was made by the president sometimes back. Kenyans were complaining about runaway corruption, and then, the president came out and said, I have nothing to do because it's not my job. Now, we have institutions, and they have to take responsibility for what they should be performing. I don't want to sit here and say it's the duty of politicians to educate voters. That is the work of the IEBC. That is why they're given money. They have a budget for that. And if we sit here and begin talking about politicians educating voters, it's not going to work. It's not going to be able to assist in...
What about getting the voters out?
Now, that is again the job of the IEBC. They need to tell voters it's your duty, it's your right, it's your obligation as a Kenyan to come out and vote. Because if you don't vote, you get the kind of leaders you don't want. You don't want, maybe you, of course, if you have some kind of passion and you need leadership which works for you, you have to get out and vote. So IEBC has to sensitize voters and tell them to go out and vote. Now, we're not saying politicians should not encourage voters to go out and vote. They can do that, especially, of course, we can see that happening in strongholds. When you feel like a particular place is meant to get you more votes, you will go there and tell guys to come out and vote. That is a selfish, of course, drive. But again, responsibility rests with the IEBC. It has to go out there, tell guys to vote. That is its work. So we cannot shift the responsibility to politicians. Institutions must get to work. That is it.
Okay. Well, in a short while, we'll be trying to link up with our reporter, Sam Gituku, who is in Dubai, He's been checking on the printing of the presidential ballot papers by Al Gurai. We do understand the printing work is done, and we're just waiting for the ballot papers to be shipped, or rather flown to Kenya. Because that bit is done, we'll be trying to link up with him once we do get that connection. Yes? Well, time now for another break. We'll be back with that and a lot more.